In Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a homeless father clutching his last $20 was about to bid on a condemned house. What started as a desperate gamble for shelter took a shocking turn when his son and their dog discovered $152 million in stolen art beneath the floorboards. Trista Arkins wasn't your typical auction bidder. For 8 months, he had survived in a battered Toyota with his son Jamie, known for protecting his child's dignity despite losing everything. When they uncovered the legendary Castellano Collection hidden in their new home, they had no idea they were walking into a deadly conspiracy that would test whether desperation justifies keeping what doesn't belong to you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The municipal building smelled of mildew and desperation, a scent Trista Arkins had become intimately familiar with over the past 8 months. He sat in the back row of folding chairs, the crumpled $20 bill growing damp in his palm. Jamie pressed against his side, small and warm, trying to stay still like Trista had asked. Outside in the battered Toyota, Rusty waited, their German shepherd's anxious whining likely audible even through the closed doors. The auctioneer's voice droned on, monotonous as a funeral dirge. Lot 44, 2156, Miller Avenue, tax-delinquent commercial property, structural damage, starting bid $100. Trista's hand relaxed slightly. 100 might as well have been 1 million. He shouldn't be here. The $20 clutched in his fist represented 3 days of collecting scrap metal, hauling copper wire from demolished buildings, his back screaming with each load. That money should buy food, should buy Jamie new shoes. The boy's toes were pressing against the worn canvas of his sneakers. Should buy the antibiotics Jamie needed last month when his cough turned wet and rattling. The kind of cough that reminded Trista too much of Sarah's final days. But food ran out. Shoes wore through. Medicine treated symptoms while the disease of their situation remained untouched. They needed shelter before winter came to Pennsylvania, before the Toyota's heater finally gave out and the nights became something worse than uncomfortable. Lot 45, 892 Industrial Boulevard. Jamie shifted, his hand finding Trista's free one. The boy's fingers were small, trusting. 8 years old, and he'd spent the last 8 months learning to sleep in the back of a truck, to wash his face in gas station bathrooms, to ignore the stares of other kids at school who noticed his clothes never changed. He'd learned not to ask for things, not to complain, not to be a child. That was Trista's fault. All of it. The memory came unbidden. Sarah in their bed, her breathing labored, skin pale as winter light. "Take care of him," she'd whispered. "Promise me, Trista, whatever happens, you take care of our boy." He'd promised, and then he'd failed. The medical bills had come first, astronomical numbers that insurance refused to cover. Pre-existing condition, they'd said. Improper documentation. Sorry for your loss. Then Ray's betrayal. His business partner, his friend, disappearing with $180,000 and leaving Trista holding the bag. The bank had seized everything. House, tools, future. For 8 months, Trista had kept his promise the only way he could. He'd kept Jamie in school using a friend's address, though that friend had stopped returning calls last month. He'd kept them fed, mostly. He'd kept them safe. But he couldn't keep them warm through another Pennsylvania winter in the Toyota. Lot 46, 3401, Commerce Street, condemned warehouse. Trista's construction knowledge cataloged the problems automatically. Asbestos, lead paint, structural collapse imminent. The building would cost hundreds of thousands to even make safe, let alone habitable. No one bid. Lot 47. The auctioneer continued, his tone suggesting he expected the same result. 1847 Forge Street. Victorian residential structure, 3 stories, approximately 2,800 square feet. Tax delinquent for 7 years. Severe deterioration. City has assessed total renovation costs exceeding property value. Selling as is, buyer responsible for all code violations and back taxes. The projector screen behind the auctioneer displayed a photograph that looked like it came from a horror movie. The Victorian house sagged like a drunk leaning against a lamppost. Windows were broken or boarded. The porch listed to one side. Vegetation had reclaimed the yard, wild and tangled. But it had walls, a roof, space. "Starting bid," the auctioneer said, and Trista could hear the resignation in his voice. $20. Trista's hand shot up before his brain could intervene. The auctioneer blinked. "We have $20. Do I hear 25? Silence filled the room. The handful of other attendees, investors looking for bargains, opportunists seeking quick flips, stared at the photograph with barely concealed disgust. One man laughed quietly, a sound that made Trista's jaw clench. $20 going once. The auctioneer's gavel hovered. Going twice. Jamie's hand tightened around Trista's. The boy was holding his breath. Sold. The gavel fell with a crack that seemed to echo in Trista's chest. Lot 47 to bidder 73 for $20. Trista sat frozen. They owned a house. The paperwork took 30 minutes. The clerk who processed his payment looked at the $20 bill with something between pity and disbelief. Then at Trista's worn clothes. Then at Jamie's too small shoes. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. "Property is available for immediate occupancy," she said, stamping documents. "Though I strongly advise you to have it inspected before." "Thank you," Trista interrupted, taking the papers with hands that shook for different reasons now. Outside, Rusty barked once when he saw them, his tail wagging furiously. Jamie ran ahead, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck. "We got it, Rusty. We got a house." The drive through Millbrook told the story of a town that had died slowly, by degrees. Shuttered factories lined Industrial Boulevard, their windows empty as missing teeth. For lease signs faded in the sun, their phone numbers long disconnected. A few businesses clung to survival. A corner store, a check-cashing place with bars on the windows, a pawn shop advertising "We buy gold" in letters that had lost their shimmer. This was Forge Street territory, the old industrial district where factory workers had once lived. The houses here had been built solid a century ago, meant to last. But time and economic collapse had done what poor construction never could. Most stood empty, awaiting demolition that the city couldn't afford. "There it is," Jamie pointed. 1847 Forge Street looked worse in person. The Victorians' ornate details, the gingerbread trim, the wraparound porch, the tower room, had been beautiful once. Now they were just more surface area for decay. Paint peeled in strips. Gutters hung at angles. The yard was a jungle of waist-high weeds and volunteer saplings. But it was theirs. Trista parked on the cracked driveway, taking a moment to study the structure with professional eyes. The foundation looked solid, stone and mortar work from an era when craftsmanship meant something. The roof sagged but hadn't collapsed. Most of the windows were intact, just broken. The porch was a death trap. They'd need to enter through the side. "Can we go in?" Jamie was already unbuckling his seatbelt. "Careful," Trista said, the word automatic now. "Stay where I can see you." They found a side door that opened with minimal persuasion. Inside, the house breathed decades of abandonment. Dust motes swirled in shafts of afternoon light. The wallpaper hung in strips, revealing horsehair plaster beneath. Water damage stained the ceiling in abstract patterns. Debris littered the floors, beer cans, fast food wrappers, evidence of squatters long gone. But it was dry, enclosed, private. "This can be our living room," Jamie's voice echoed in the empty space, bouncing off walls that hadn't heard a child's excitement in who knew how long. Rusty padded through the rooms, sniffing cautiously, his body language uncertain but not alarmed. Trista moved through the first floor, his construction knowledge creating a mental checklist. Plumbing was shot. He could see that from the bathroom's condition. Electrical would need complete replacement. Heating system, if one even existed, was beyond salvage. The work required was staggering. But the bones were good. The structure was sound. He could do this. With time and salvaged materials and the kind of determination that came from having no other choice, he could make this livable. Dad, Come see. Jamie's voice pulled him upstairs. The boy had found a small bedroom, maybe 10 by 12 feet. A broken mirror hung on one wall. A single window overlooked what had once been a garden. The ceiling sloped with the roofline, creating the cozy feel of an attic room. "This can be my room," Jamie said, and there was wonder in his voice. "My own room." Something cracked in Trista's chest. For 8 months, Jamie had slept in the back of the Toyota, curled around Rusty for warmth. Before that, he'd shared a room with another boy at the shelter, belongings locked in a single drawer. Before that, their old house where Sarah had died, where every corner held memories that hurt too much to examine. "Yeah," Trista managed, his throat tight. "Yeah, buddy, this can be your room." That night, they ate cold sandwiches from the gas station, their last splurge before the money ran completely out. Trista had found a broom and cleared one room on the first floor, the one with the fewest holes in the ceiling. They spread their sleeping bags on the dusty hardwood, created their familiar nest. Jamie in the middle, Rusty against the wall, Trista on the outside, the formation they'd maintained in the Toyota, in shelters, in the one motel room they'd been able to afford back in June. "Dad." Jamie's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yeah, buddy? Is this really ours? Like nobody can make us leave?" Trista thought about the back taxes he couldn't pay, the code violations he couldn't fix, the 1,000 ways this could still fall apart. He thought about winter coming and a house with no heat. He thought about his empty bank account and his empty stomach and his son's trusting voice in the dark. "This is ours," he said, and made it a promise. "Nobody's making us leave." Jamie sighed, a sound of pure contentment. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into sleep. Rusty shifted, settling with a soft groan. Trista lay awake, staring at the ceiling where moonlight traced patterns through gaps in the boards. His body ached from months of manual labor, from sleeping on hard surfaces, from the constant low-level stress of survival. But for the first time since Sarah died, he felt something that might possibly be hope. They had a house. It was a wreck. It was a disaster. It was probably going to fall down around their ears the first time the wind blew hard. But it was theirs. Across the room, Rusty suddenly lifted his head. His ears pricked forward, and a low whine escaped his throat. The dog stood, padding across the floor to the doorway. Through the opening, Trista could hear him moving into what had been the dining room. Scratching. Rusty was scratching at something. "Rusty, quiet," Trista whispered, not wanting to wake Jamie. The dog looked back at him, whined again, then returned to scratching. His paws worked at the floor with unusual persistence, the same spot over and over, like he'd found something. Trista made a mental note to check it in the morning. Probably just mouse smell or some other animal trace. Nothing that couldn't wait. He pulled Jamie closer, felt his son's warmth against his side, and let exhaustion finally drag him under. Tomorrow he'd start figuring out how to turn this wreck into a home. Tomorrow he'd start salvaging materials. Tomorrow he'd start job hunting again. Find something that paid enough to keep them fed while he worked on the house. Tomorrow. Tonight they were safe. They were together. They were home. And in the dining room, Rusty continued to scratch at a section of floor that sounded, if you listened carefully, just slightly hollow. Trista's hand still ached from yesterday's work as he loaded scrap metal into the Toyota's bed. The morning air carried October's bite, promising the winter that haunted his thoughts. Jamie slept in the back seat, Rusty curled protectively at his feet, both exhausted from their first night in the house. He needed $50. Maybe 60. Enough for food that would last the week, enough for the propane camping stove he'd seen at the pawn shop. The copper piping he'd salvaged from an abandoned warehouse on Miller Street should fetch that much at the scrapyard. "Stay inside," he'd told Jamie before leaving, the boy barely awake. "Don't open the door for anyone. I'll be back in 2 hours." Now, driving away from 1847 Forge Street, Trista glanced in the rearview mirror at the sagging Victorian. In daylight, it looked even worse, a monument to decay in a neighborhood of similar ruins. But it was theirs. That single thought carried him through each day. Inside the house, Jamie woke to Rusty's insistent nudging. the dog's nose pressed against his cheek, wet and cold. "I'm awake. I'm awake," Jamie mumbled, pushing himself up from the sleeping bag. Rusty padded immediately to the dining room doorway, looked back, whined. The same spot as last night. The dog had been obsessed with it, scratching until Trista called him away. "What did you find, boy?" Jamie followed the German shepherd into the dining room. Morning light slanted through broken windows, illuminating dust motes that swirled with their movement. Rusty went directly to a corner near the bay window, his paws working at the floorboards with renewed intensity. The scratching echoed in the empty room. Rusty's nails caught on something, a gap between boards that seemed wider than the others. Jamie knelt beside him, running his small fingers along the seam. "It's loose," he whispered. The floorboard shifted slightly under pressure. Jamie looked around the room, spotted a butter knife they'd used last night for their sandwiches. His mother had taught him that tools could be anything if you used them right. The memory came with the familiar ache, her voice, her hands guiding his, the softness of her smile. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He pushed the thought away and wedged the knife into the gap. The board resisted, then lifted with a groan of old wood. Beneath it, more boards. But these looked different. Newer, maybe, cut in a pattern that didn't match the rest of the floor. "Dad's gonna want to see this," Jamie said to Rusty. But the dog was already scratching at the revealed section, his excitement building. Jamie worked the butter knife around the edges. The section was maybe 3 feet square, and when he finally pried it up, hinges he hadn't noticed before creaked in protest. Not just loose floorboards, a trapdoor. Cold air breathed up from the darkness below. Jamie felt his heart quicken, that mixture of fear and excitement he remembered from before, when life had been normal and scary things were just stories. He pulled out his small flashlight, a dollar store special that Trista had bought him months ago, one of the few possessions they'd kept. The weak beam barely penetrated the darkness. Stairs. Narrow wooden steps descending into what should have been a crawl space but looked deeper. Much deeper. Rusty whined, torn between his protective instincts and his curiosity. "We should wait for Dad," Jamie said aloud. But even as the words left his mouth, he was calculating how long until Trista returned. An hour, maybe more. And this was their house now, their secret to discover. He descended slowly, each step creaking under his weight. Rusty followed, his body pressed against Jamie's leg. The air grew cooler as they went down, carrying a strange smell. Not the mustiness of the house above, but something else. Something that reminded Jamie of the museum his class had visited last year, before everything fell apart. At the bottom, his flashlight beam swept across a space that shouldn't exist. The basement was small, maybe 12 feet by 15, but the walls were concrete, newer than the house above. And the ceiling, Jamie's breath caught, the ceiling had lights. Actual electric lights. His hand found a switch by pure chance. When he flipped it, fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing a room that made his 8-year-old mind struggle to process what it was seeing. Paintings leaned against the walls, each wrapped in protective covering. Wooden crates stood in careful rows, stenciled with words Jamie couldn't fully read but recognized as important. And in the center of the room, a large metal safe squatted like a sleeping animal. "Holy cow," Jamie whispered. Rusty circled the room, sniffing everything, his tail wagging slowly. One of the paintings had torn protective covering. Jamie could see the edge of a frame, the corner of what looked like a very old picture of a lady in a fancy dress. A small tag hung from the frame's edge, Castellano Collection, item 47. Jamie didn't know what that meant, but he knew treasure when he saw it. His hands shook as he pulled out Trista's old phone, the one that barely held a charge, that they only used for emergencies. He snapped photos of everything. The paintings, the crates, the safe, the room itself. The phone's battery was at 15% when he finally climbed back up the stairs, Rusty close behind. They replaced the trapdoor carefully, covered it with the loose floorboard. Jamie sat on the floor, staring at the spot, his mind racing with possibilities he didn't have words for yet. When the Toyota's engine rumbled outside 40 minutes later, Jamie ran to the door. Trista came in carrying 2 grocery bags. More food than they'd had in weeks. "Dad," Jamie said, his voice high with excitement. "Dad, you have to see what Rusty found." Trista set down the bags, his tired face showing concern. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, nothing's wrong. Everything's—" Jamie grabbed his father's hand. "Just come look, please." In the dining room, Jamie lifted the floorboard, then the trapdoor. Rusty barked once, as if to say, "See? I told you." Trista stared into the darkness below, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he descended the stairs. Jamie heard the light switch click, heard his father's sharp intake of breath, heard nothing for a long moment that seemed to stretch forever. When Trista emerged, his face had gone pale. "Jamie," he said quietly, "go get my phone charger from the car. Don't touch anything else down there. Don't tell anyone about this. Nobody. Understand?" "What is it, Dad? Is it treasure?" Trista looked at his son, and Jamie saw something in his father's eyes he'd never seen before. Not quite fear, not quite hope. Something that lived between them, something that looked like it might swallow them whole. "I don't know yet, buddy," Trista said, "but we need to be very, very careful." The Millbrook Public Library smelled of old paper and industrial cleaner. Trista sat at a corner computer terminal, Jamie beside him working on homework, Rusty tied to a bike rack outside where Trista could see him through the window. 3 days had passed since the discovery, 3 days of Trista barely sleeping, his mind churning through possibilities and consequences. He'd told Jamie it was probably nothing. Old junk someone had stored and forgotten. But Trista had seen enough to know better. The climate control system in that hidden room hadn't been running on hope. Someone had paid for that electricity under a separate meter, had built that space to preserve something valuable. The search bar cursor blinked. Trista's fingers hovered over the keys, then typed, "Castellano Collection." The results loaded instantly. His stomach dropped. Castellano Museum heist, 1995, $152 million in art stolen. The article showed a distinguished older man standing beside paintings in an elegant gallery. Vincent Castellano, renowned private collector. The photos of the stolen items made Trista's hands go cold. He'd seen those exact frames in his basement. The same paintings. The same careful labels. He clicked another link. Another. Each article told the same story. In October 1995, thieves had broken into Vincent Castellano's private museum during a charity gala. They'd taken his entire collection, paintings, rare manuscripts, bearer bonds his family had collected over generations. The theft had destroyed the old man. He died 5 years later. His daughter Elena left to search for a collection that had vanished like smoke. 30 years. The items had been hidden in that basement for 30 years. "Dad." Jamie's voice pulled him back. "You okay? You look weird." "Fine, buddy. Just reading." Trista closed the browser windows, his mind racing. He opened a new search, Finder's Rights Pennsylvania Law. The legal language swam before his eyes. Abandoned property. Adverse possession. Stolen goods. The words tangled together, none of them offering the clear answer he desperately needed. But one phrase appeared repeatedly, stark and unforgiving. Stolen property must be returned to the rightful owner, regardless of how it was acquired. Jamie coughed. That same wet sound that had worried Trista last week. The boy covered his mouth, trying to muffle it, but Trista heard. Of course he heard. Every cough, every sniffle, every sign that Jamie might be getting sick sent Trista's anxiety into overdrive. They had no health insurance, no money for doctors. The free clinic had a 3-week wait for appointments. And winter was coming. Trista stared at the computer screen, at articles describing bearer bonds worth millions, paintings that could fund a lifetime of security. Then he looked at his son, 8 years old with holes in his shoes and a cough that needed medicine they couldn't afford. What kind of father am I? The question had haunted him since Sarah died. Since Ray's betrayal. Since the first night they'd slept in the Toyota. He'd promised Sarah he'd take care of Jamie. Promised he'd give their son a good life. Some promises he was learning were easier to make than keep. That afternoon, Trista stood in the soup kitchen line at Pastor Evelyn Woods's church. The basement room hummed with quiet conversation, the smell of vegetable soup and fresh bread cutting through the November chill. They'd been coming here twice a week for months, and Pastor Woods always greeted them with the same warm smile. Never pity, never judgment. Trista, she approached while Jamie was occupied with coloring books at a children's table. "How's the new house?" "Standing," he said. "Barely. And you? How are you holding up?" The question, asked with genuine care, nearly broke him. Trista found himself talking before his brain could stop him. "If you found something that didn't belong to you, something valuable that could change your life, what would you do?" Pastor Woods studied him with those knowing eyes. She'd been serving Millbrook's Forgotten for 20 years. She'd heard every story, seen every shade of desperation. "That depends," she said slowly. "Did you steal it?" "No, but someone else did. A long time ago. And the person it was stolen from suffered because of it." Pastor Woods nodded, stirring her coffee with deliberate care. "The truth has a way of coming out, Trista. The question isn't whether it will, but whether you meet it or run from it. Running might feel safer in the moment, but it has a way of catching up to you. And when it does, it brings friends, guilt, fear, consequences compounded by time. What if meeting it means losing everything? Again? What if running from it means losing yourself?" She met his eyes. "Your boy's watching you, learning what kind of man his father is. That's worth more than any treasure." The newspaper hit Trista's porch the next morning with a soft thud. He hadn't subscribed to the Millbrook Gazette, hadn't even known anyone still delivered papers. But there it was, and there, on the front page of the local interest section, was his face. "Homeless father's $20 gamble pays OFF. Family finds home in tax sale." The photo must have been taken at the auction. Trista holding Jamie's hand, both of them looking at paperwork. The article was sympathetic, even heartwarming, Tommy Bradford's byline at the top. It told their story. The homelessness, the desperate bid, the Victorian house at 1847, Forge Street that nobody else wanted. The address, right there in print. Trista's phone, charged now, reception spotty but functional, rang 20 minutes later. Unknown number. "Mr. Arkins? This is James Peterson with Peterson Investigations. I represent a client interested in your recent property acquisition. Would you be available for a brief inspection of the premises?" Trista's mouth went dry. "What kind of inspection?" "Just a formality. My client has been researching properties in that area for quite some time. Your house came up in our records. We'd like to verify some historical details." "I'm not interested. Mr. Arkins, I assure you this is a legitimate—" Trista hung up. His hands shook. The phone rang again. Different number. Then again. By noon, Trista had stopped answering, letting calls go to voicemail. But he listened to each message, and each one heightened his dread. An art historian wanting to discuss historical significance. A property assessor needing to verify records. A lawyer representing interested parties. They knew. Somehow they knew. That evening, Trista sat at the library again, searching for legal aid services. He found the Millbrook Legal Aid Clinic, read about their services for low-income residents. His finger hovered over the phone number. Calling would mean admitting the problem was real. Would mean starting a process he couldn't stop. But Pastor Woods's words echoed. The truth has a way of coming out. He made the call. A woman answered, Sophia Martinez, intake coordinator. Her voice was professional but warm. "I need legal advice," Trista said, "about property rights. And other things." "What kind of other things?" "If someone bought a house and found valuable items inside, items that might have been stolen a long time ago, what would their legal position be?" The line went silent for a moment. When Sophia spoke again, her tone had shifted, become intensely focused. "Mr. Arkins. Trista Arkins. Mr. Arkins, I think you should come in tomorrow morning. First thing. This sounds like something we need to discuss in detail. After he hung up, Trista sat in the Toyota outside the library. Jamie was inside, still reading, Rusty beside him. Through the window, Trista watched his son laugh at something in his book. That pure, uncomplicated joy that children could still access even when their world was falling apart. 3 blocks away, in a black sedan parked on a side street, Victor Sloan lowered his binoculars. He'd been tracking the Arkins family since the newspaper article. The address had pinged in his network of informants, an automated alert for any activity at 1847 Forge Street. 30 years. He'd been searching for 30 years. And now some homeless nobody had stumbled onto his masterpiece, the collection he'd risked everything to take, that his partner had hidden and taken to the grave. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call. "It's there," he said. "Get the team ready. We move soon." Across town, in an elegant brownstone, Elena Castellano stared at her father's photograph. She'd received the call from her investigator an hour ago. After 3 decades, they'd found it. Her father's life's work. Everything the theft had taken. And it was in the hands of a homeless man with a child. Elena picked up her phone. "Book me a flight to Pennsylvania," she told her assistant. "I'm leaving tonight." At FBI headquarters in Pittsburgh, Detective Lorraine Pacheco read the email from Millbrook PD's routine intelligence sharing. A property connected to an old cold case had been sold. 1847 Forge Street. She remembered that address from the files. The house had belonged to Marcus Webb, the suspected builder of the secret room, dead since 1997. She opened the Castellano file, inactive for 15 years but never closed. Then she called her supervisor. "I think we just caught a break on the museum heist," she said. "I need to make a trip to Millbrook." The pieces were moving, forces converging. And in his house on Forge Street, Trista Arkins lay awake beside his sleeping son, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how to protect Jamie from what was coming. The safe in the basement remained unopened. Trista both wanted and feared to know what was inside. But he suspected very soon he wouldn't have a choice. Sofia Martinez arrived exactly at 9, her sedan looking out of place among the Rust Belt decay of Forge Street. Trista watched from the window as she stepped out, professional in a blazer despite the November cold, her eyes already assessing the property. She carried a worn leather briefcase that spoke of courtrooms and late nights, the kind of accessory that came with years of fighting battles nobody else wanted to take on. Jamie was upstairs in his room, instructed to stay quiet. Rusty lay at the bottom of the stairs, alert. "Mr. Arkins." Sofia's handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "Thank you for trusting me with this." "I don't have much choice," Trista said, leading her inside. She didn't flinch at the house's condition. The peeling wallpaper, the water-stained ceiling, the reality of poverty that most lawyers never saw up close. Instead, she pulled out a legal pad, clicked her pen, and got to work. "Tell me everything," she said. Trista did. The auction, the discovery, the research. He showed her photographs on his phone, watched her eyes widen as she swiped through images of paintings and crates. When he mentioned the Castellano Collection, her pen stopped moving. "You're certain? The Castellano Collection?" "The labels match. The descriptions online. Everything matches." Sofia set down her pen carefully, as if sudden movements might shatter the moment. "Mr. Arkins, do you understand what this means? We're talking about one of the largest unsolved art thefts in American history. The legal implications are—" A knock at the door interrupted her. Firm. Official. Through the window, Trista saw a woman in a dark suit, FBI credentials already in hand. His stomach dropped. "Don't say anything," Sofia whispered, standing. "I'm your attorney. Let me handle this." Trista opened the door. The woman's eyes were sharp, intelligent, taking in everything about him in a single sweep. "Mr. Arkins? I'm Detective Lorraine Pacheco, FBI Art Crime Team. I need to ask you some questions about this property." "My client has legal representation." Sofia stepped forward. "Whatever questions you have should go through me." Lorraine's gaze shifted to Sofia, assessing. "And you are?" Sophia Martinez, Millbrook Legal Aid. Mr. Arkins has retained my services. How convenient. Lorraine's tone remained professional, but Trista caught the skepticism. Mr. Arkins, I have reason to believe this property may contain evidence related to an ongoing federal investigation. I need to inspect the premises. Do you have a warrant? Sophia asked. I can obtain one within the hour. The two women stared at each other, and Trista felt the weight of competing forces, of systems and procedures that would roll over him regardless of what he wanted. It's okay, he heard himself say. Both women turned to him. I'll show you. I don't have anything to hide. Trista, Sophia began. I found something I didn't know was there, Trista said, looking at Lorraine. I researched it. I called a lawyer. I was trying to do the right thing. If that's a crime, then charge me. But I'm not hiding anything. Something shifted in Lorraine's expression. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. She nodded slowly. Show me. The hidden basement drew sharp breaths from both women. Lorraine stood at the bottom of the stairs, her flashlight sweeping across the preserved collection. And Trista saw the moment when professional duty collided with human awe. My God, she whispered. It's really here. Sophia was already on her phone, photographing everything, documenting the scene. This was sealed when you purchased the property? She asked Trista. Completely. I had no knowledge of its existence until 3 days ago. Lorraine knelt beside one of the paintings, careful not to touch. I need to secure this scene. This is evidence in a federal case. I'm calling it in. Detective. Sophia's voice carried the careful authority of someone who knew the law inside out. My client legally purchased this property. Whatever was inside came with that purchase. Before you seize anything, we need to establish the proper legal framework. This is stolen property. There's no legal framework that... Another knock echoed from upstairs. Louder this time. Insistent. Trista climbed back up, heard Jamie's footsteps above as the boy moved away from his bedroom door. Through the front window, he saw a town car, a driver standing beside it, and on his porch, an elderly woman in expensive clothes that somehow looked both elegant and worn, like wealth that had survived grief. Elena Castellano. He knew her face from the articles, but the photographs hadn't captured the way she held herself, the dignity wrapped around sorrow like armor. Her eyes met his through the glass, and he saw decades of searching, of hope exhausted and rekindled and exhausted again. Trista opened the door. Mr. Arkins. Her voice carried the slight accent of old Philadelphia money. My name is Elena Castellano. I believe you have something that belonged to my father. Behind him, he heard Lorraine and Sophia emerging from the basement. The house suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Elena's gaze moved past him, took in the poverty of his surroundings, then returned to his face. May I see? She asked, and there was something in her voice that wasn't demand or entitlement, but pleading. Ms. Castellano, Lorraine stepped forward. This is now a federal crime scene. I can't allow... Please. Elena's composure cracked, just slightly. 30 years. I've been searching for 30 years. Just let me see if it's real. Trista looked at Lorraine, at Sophia, at this woman who'd lost something precious to the same forces that had taken everything from him. Different circumstances, different losses, same grief. One painting, he said. Just one. Lorraine opened her mouth to object, then closed it. She nodded. They descended together, an unlikely procession. At the bottom, Elena stopped. Her hand went to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face without sound. That one, she whispered, pointing to a frame near the back. The woman in blue, my father's favorite. He kept it in his study. I used to sit with him while he looked at it. She moved closer, not touching, just looking. Her shoulders shook. I'm sorry, Trista found himself saying. I didn't know. I just needed a place for my son to sleep. Elena turned to him, her face wet with tears. You have a child? Upstairs. He's 8. Something passed across Elena's face. Recognition, perhaps, of parallel desperation. She wiped her eyes with trembling hands. "Lorraine," she said, her voice steadier now. "Please secure the collection. All of it. I want everything authenticated and preserved." She looked at Trista. "And Mr. Arkins and I need to talk. Privately." Outside, media trucks were pulling up. Neighbors emerged from houses Trista had thought abandoned. A crowd was forming. "Too late for private," Sophia muttered, peering out a grimy window. Jamie appeared at the top of the basement stairs. "Dad? What's happening? Why are all those people outside?" Trista climbed the steps, pulled his son close. "It's okay, buddy. Everything's going to be okay." But even as he said it, he watched through the window as more cars arrived, as reporters set up cameras, as his last hope of quietly resolving this disappeared into the November morning. Rusty growled low, hackles rising. The dog was staring at something outside, at a black sedan parked half a block away. Inside the sedan, Victor Sloan watched the FBI presence, the media circus, the walls closing around his prize. His jaw clenched. They'd moved faster than he'd anticipated. But it didn't matter. The collection was still in that house, still within reach. He pulled out his phone, sent a single text, "Tonight, be ready." Then he started the engine and drove away, already planning how to take back what had always been his. By noon, Forge Street had transformed into a circus. News vans lined both sides of the cracked pavement. Satellite dishes pointed skyward like flowers seeking sun. Reporters jockeyed for position, their cameras trained on the sagging Victorian that had suddenly become the most famous house in Pennsylvania. Trista stood at the window, Jamie pressed against his side, both of them trapped. Lorraine had stationed 2 agents outside, but they couldn't stop the cameras, couldn't silence the questions shouted every time the front door opened. "Mr. Arkins, how does it feel to find a fortune? Did you know what was in the house when you bought it? Will you fight to keep the collection?" Trista closed the blinds. Inside, Sophia was on her phone, arguing with someone about property rights and seizure protocols. Elena had left an hour ago, her final words still hanging in the air. "We'll speak again soon." A commotion outside drew Trista back to the window. A man was pushing through the media crowd, smiling and waving like a politician. Expensive leather jacket, designer jeans. Hair styled in a way that screamed money and vanity. Trista's blood went cold. Raymond Kowalski. "Dad." Jamie felt the tension in his father's body. "What's wrong?" "Stay here," Trista managed, his voice strangled. He opened the door before Ray could knock. His former partner's smile widened, arms spreading in mock greeting. "Trista, brother, look at you on TV. Get off my porch." "Your porch." Ray's smile never wavered, but his eyes hardened. "That's interesting, because last I checked, you've been living in our company truck." "Company property, Trista, which means anything you own, I have a stake in. You embezzled $180,000 and disappeared for 2 years. A misunderstanding. We can discuss that later." Ray stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Right now, we need to talk about what you found. That collection's worth millions. I figure 50-50 is fair." The rage that Trista had suppressed for 2 years, through homelessness, through Sarah's death, through 8 months of watching his son go hungry, erupted. His hand shot out, grabbing Ray's jacket, slamming him against the porch railing. "You destroyed my life." The words came out raw, primal. "My wife died because we couldn't afford her medicine. My son has been sleeping in a truck. Because of you." Ray's facade cracked, revealing the coward underneath. "Get your hands off me. This is assault." Sophia appeared, pulling Trista back. "Don't. He's not worth it." Cameras captured everything. Ray straightened his jacket, that smile returning. "We'll be in touch, brother. My lawyers will be very interested in this." He disappeared into the media crowd, but the damage was done. Trista saw himself on a nearby camera monitor. Rage-filled, violent, everything the world expected from someone like him. That night, Lorraine stationed agents outside. "We'll move the collection tomorrow," she told Trista. "It'll be safer in FBI storage." But at 2 a.m., the power cut out. Rusty's barking woke them. frantic, terrified. Trista grabbed his flashlight, heard sounds from below. The basement. Someone was breaking in through an exterior wall. Jamie, bathroom. Lock the door. Now. Trista descended the stairs as a figure emerged from the basement. Silver hair. Cold eyes. Victor Sloan. Just let me pass, Victor said quietly. And nobody gets hurt. There's a child upstairs. Then you should move. Trista didn't think. He lunged. They crashed into the wall, flashlight spinning away. Victor was older but trained, his movements efficient. A fist caught Trista's ribs, driving the air from his lungs. But Trista had been living on streets, fighting for survival. He fought dirty, clawed, bit, used desperation as a weapon. Victor broke away, running. "This isn't over," he called from the darkness. By the time the FBI agents breached the door, Victor was gone. Jamie emerged from the bathroom, tears streaming down his face. "Dad!" Trista pulled him close, tasted blood in his mouth. Outside, sirens wailed. Lorraine surveyed the damage, her face grim. "We're moving the collection tonight, and you and your son are going into protective custody." "No," Trista said. "This is our home. Mr. Arkins, whoever that was, they'll come back." Trista looked at the hole in his basement wall, at his terrified son, at the home they'd owned for less than a week. Everything they'd gained was slipping away. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I should have been." Darren, his brother, watching the news, finally reaching out. Trista's hands shook as he typed back, "We need help." Darren's SUV pulled up at dawn, loaded with groceries that could feed them for weeks. Trista watched from the porch as his older brother stepped out, looking simultaneously prosperous and broken. 4 years older, always more successful, always the one their parents had praised. And now here, finally, when everything had fallen apart so publicly there was no ignoring it. "Trista." Darren's voice cracked on the name. They stood 3 feet apart, years of silence between them. Then Darren pulled him into an embrace that Trista's body resisted before finally accepting. "I should have come sooner," Darren said. "I should have. God, Trista. I saw you on the news and I'm so sorry." Inside, over coffee Darren had brought, real coffee, not the instant powder they'd been using, the words came haltingly. Darren talked about his alcoholism, 6 months sober now, how shame had kept him away, how he'd convinced himself that offering money was enough, that Trista's pride in refusing meant Darren was absolved. "I have a guest room," Darren said. "2, actually. You and Jamie could stay with us. Sarah and the kids would love to have you." Trista's jaw tightened. "We have a house. A house with a hole in the basement and criminals trying to break in. It's ours." "Trista, Uncle Darren?" Jamie appeared at the kitchen doorway, shy but curious. He barely remembered this man who'd once been a regular presence at family dinners. Darren's face softened. "Hey, kiddo. You've gotten so big." Within minutes, Jamie was showing Darren his room, chattering about school and Rusty and the treasure they'd found. Trista watched his son's animation, the way Jamie responded to adult attention that wasn't weighted with exhaustion and worry, and felt something twist in his chest. Pride had kept him from calling Darren. Pride had kept him sleeping in a truck rather than accepting help. And all that pride had protected was his own wounded ego, not Jamie's well-being. That afternoon, Elena Castellano returned. Without her lawyer this time, without the FBI presence. Just an elderly woman who moved with careful dignity into Trista's devastated kitchen. "My father," she began, settling into one of the 2 chairs Trista owned, "destroyed himself looking for that collection, consumed him. He died believing his life's work had been erased." Trista sat across from her, listening. "I lost him twice. Once to the obsession, then to death." Elena's hands trembled slightly. "You lost your wife to poverty, to a system that values money over lives. I don't understand what I'm trying to say I see you, Mr. Arkins. Not the homeless man the media loves to pity or judge. The father willing to risk everything for his child." She leaned forward. "I want my father's collection returned." but I don't want to destroy you to get it. She laid out her offer. $2 million as a finder's fee. Another $1 million to Millbrook's homeless services in Sarah's name. Full cooperation with the FBI, no legal claims to the collection. It's more than fair, she said. It's more than most would offer. But I need your answer soon, before this spirals further. Trista stared at her. $2 million. Security. The future. Everything he'd been fighting for. I need time to think. You have 24 hours. Elena stood. After that, I let my lawyers handle it their way. As evening fell, Tommy Bradford approached nervously, guilt written across his young face. Mr. Arkins, I know you probably hate me, but I've been digging into the original theft. The man who broke in last night? Victor Sloan. He's been connected to 6 unsolved art thefts. 2 people died in the last one. Tommy handed over a folder of research. I can't undo the damage my article caused, but maybe I can help finish this right. Trista took the folder, saw Victor's face staring back from a decades-old surveillance photo. Cold eyes. A man with nothing to lose. Sophia called that evening. Elena's offer is generous. Legally, you have almost no claim to that collection. If you fight this, you'll lose everything, including the house. After she hung up, Trista sat on his porch in the November dark. Jamie was inside with Darren, their laughter drifting through broken windows. Rusty lay at his feet, alert to every sound. Pastor Woods's words echoed. What kind of man do you want your son to remember? Trista pulled out his phone, started to call Elena. His finger hovered over her number. Before he could dial, every light in the house went out. Cell service died. And in the darkness, Rusty began to growl. Trista's hand found Jamie's shoulder in the darkness. Inside. Now. Rusty's growl deepened, his body tense against Trista's leg. Through the broken windows, Trista caught movement. Shadows separating from shadows, professionals moving with purpose. Dad. Jamie's voice was small, terrified. Basement. Go. They scrambled through the dark house, Trista's construction knowledge guiding him past debris he'd memorized. Behind them, glass shattered. The front door splintered under impact. The dining room, the trapdoor. Trista yanked it open, pushed Jamie down first, then Rusty. He followed, pulling the door shut above them just as footsteps thundered overhead. The basement lights still worked, powered by that separate meter. Jamie huddled against the wall, arms wrapped around Rusty. Trista looked around frantically, assessing their cage. One entrance. No exit. They were trapped. Mr. Arkins. A voice called from above, cultured and calm. Victor Sloan. I know you're down there. I can hear you breathing. Trista said nothing. His phone was dead, no signal, no way to call for help. The FBI agents outside must be incapacitated. No one was coming. I don't want to hurt you, Victor continued. Or your boy. But that collection is mine. I spent 3 years planning that heist. It was perfect, my masterpiece. And then my partner died before telling me where he'd hidden it. Footsteps above. Multiple sets. How many men had Victor brought? Walk away, Victor said. Take your son and leave through that coal chute I know Marcus built. Yes, I know about it. I know everything about this basement. My partner described it in detail before his heart gave out. Coal chute. Trista's eyes swept the basement, landed on a small metal door in the corner he'd barely noticed. Painted over, nearly invisible. You have 60 seconds, Victor said. Then I'm coming down, and things get messy. Trista moved to the safe he'd been afraid to open. His hands shook as he spun the dial. It wasn't locked, just closed. Inside, he found architectural plans yellowed with age. Drawings of this very basement, complete with measurements, specifications. And there, a coal chute leading to the outside, built when houses used coal delivery. Beneath the plans, a letter. Handwritten. Dated 1997. To whoever finds this. My name is Marcus Webb. I helped steal the Castellano Collection, and I've regretted it every day since. The money Victor promised never came. The thrill died the moment I saw Vincent Castellano's face in the news, broken by what we'd done. I built this basement to hide the collection, planning to return it anonymously. But my heart is failing, and I'm running out of time. If you found this, please give it back to the Castellano family. Some debts can't be paid, but maybe this one can be made right. M.W. 30 seconds, Mr. Arkins. Trista looked at the coal chute. Narrow. Too small for him. But Jamie. No. Jamie shook his head, reading his father's face. I'm not leaving you. Listen to me. Trista knelt, gripping Jamie's shoulders. You take Rusty. You crawl through that chute. You run to Pastor Woods's church 6 blocks east. Remember? You don't stop. You don't look back. Dad, no. Jamie. Trista's voice broke. I failed your mother. I won't fail you. You're going to be safe. Darren will take care of you. I don't want Darren. I want you. Tears streamed down both their faces. Trista pulled his son close, memorizing the feel of him, the smell of his hair, the trust that still somehow existed despite everything. I love you, Trista whispered, more than anything in this world. That's why you have to go. Time's up, Victor called. Trista pried open the coal chute, rusted, protesting, but functional. Cold November air rushed in. He pushed the letter into Jamie's jacket pocket. Give this to the FBI. Tell them everything. Can you do that for me? Jamie nodded, sobbing. Rusty whined, sensing the wrongness of this separation. Go, now. Trista lifted Jamie into the chute. The boy was small enough to fit, barely. Rusty followed, his lean body squeezing through. Trista heard them sliding, scrambling. Then nothing. They were out. They were safe. The trapdoor above exploded inward. Victor descended, flanked by 2 men with guns. Up close, he looked older than his photos, worn by obsession. Where's your son? Gone, Trista said. And he's calling the police. Victor's jaw tightened. He gestured to his men. Search every inch. If that collection's been moved, it's all here, Trista said. Exactly where you left it 30 years ago. I never left it anywhere. Marcus did. Victor moved among the paintings like a man greeting old friends. Do you know how long I've searched? How many dead ends? How many nights wondering if he'd destroyed it all? He regretted it, Trista said. He wanted to give it back. Of course he did. Marcus was weak, sentimental. Victor turned, his eyes cold. I'm not. Outside, in the November darkness, Jamie ran. His lungs burned, legs pumping, Rusty loping beside him. 6 blocks. Pastor Woods had said the church was always open, always safe. He clutched the letter in his pocket, his father's final instructions. Keep running. Don't look back. But Jamie did look back, once, at the Victorian house silhouetted against the streetlights. His home, his father. Then he ran faster. Trista faced Victor across his father's stolen legacy, buying time he hoped Jamie was using. The 2 men with guns watched him, waiting for orders. You could have been smart, Victor said. Could have taken the money Elena offered and walked away. Instead, you complicated things. I was trying to do the right thing. The right thing. Victor laughed, bitter. Morality is a luxury for people who can afford it. You should understand that better than anyone. I understand that some lines you don't cross, even when you're desperate. Noble. Stupid, but noble. Victor pulled out his phone, checked the time. My sources say the FBI moves the collection at dawn. 3 hours. I need to be gone in 2. He gestured to his men. Start loading. Carefully. They moved to obey. And Trista, alone in the basement that had changed everything, made a choice. He'd gotten Jamie to safety. That was all that mattered. Whatever happened next, his son would survive. But Trista wasn't giving up. Not yet. He'd spent 8 months living on the streets, learning to be invisible to survive. He knew this house, every corner, every shadow. Victor might have guns and men, but Trista had nothing left to lose. And that, he was about to prove, made him more dangerous than anyone expected. 6 blocks away, Jamie burst through the church doors. Pastor Woods looked up from her Bible, saw his terror, and ran to him. "Jamie? What's wrong? Where's your father?" "Men," Jamie gasped. "Bad men. They have guns. Dad made me leave. He's still there." Pastor Woods pulled out her phone, dialed 911. "This is Pastor Evelyn Woods at Grace Community Church. We have an active home invasion with armed suspects at 1847 Forge Street. Child reports his father is in danger. Send everyone." She pulled Jamie close as he sobbed. Rusty pressed against them both, whining. And at Forge Street, in a basement filled with stolen treasure, a homeless father prepared to fight for the only thing that had ever truly belonged to him, the chance to be the man his son deserved. Trista's hand found the light switch. The basement plunged into darkness. Victor's men cursed, their flashlights cutting wild arcs through the black. But Trista had spent the last week learning this space by necessity, counting steps, memorizing obstacles, understanding the terrain with the instinct of someone who'd learned to make homes out of nothing. He moved along the wall, silent, reaching the old boiler system Marcus Webb had left functional. His construction knowledge read the pipes, the valves, the pressure gauges. He cranked the release valve fully open. Steam hissed into the darkness, hot and thick. Within seconds, the basement filled with fog. "Get that light back on," Victor shouted. "Now!" One of the gunmen stumbled, his flashlight beam swinging wildly. Trista was there, emerging from the steam like a ghost, driving his shoulder into the man's gut. They crashed into a crate. The gun clattered away. Trista had never been a fighter. He'd been a contractor, a husband, a father. But 8 months on the streets had taught him what desperation could do, how survival stripped away everything except the raw will to keep breathing. He fought like the homeless man he was, dirty, brutal, using every advantage. His fist connected with the gunman's jaw. Once, twice, the man went limp. "Trista!" Victor's voice cut through the chaos. "This accomplishes nothing. I'll burn this whole place down before I let the FBI take it." The second gunman fired blindly. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash illuminating chaos. Steam, shadows, paintings worth millions surrounded by violence. Trista dropped low, crawled between crates. His hands found something metal, a crowbar Marcus had left decades ago. He gripped it, feeling its weight. Above them, sirens wailed. Multiple units converging. "They're coming," Trista called out. "Jamie made it. It's over, Victor." "Over." Victor's laugh was unhinged. "I've spent 30 years searching. 30 years. This collection is my legacy. My masterpiece. I won't let them take it. I won't let you take it." Movement in the steam. The second gunman trying to flank. Trista swung the crowbar, heard the impact, the cry of pain. Another threat down. Just him and Victor now. The older man emerged from the steam. No gun. Just rage and desperation aging him beyond his years. They faced each other in the swirling fog. Two men who'd lost everything, separated only by the choices they'd made. "You think you're better than me?" Victor spat. "You're not. We're the same, both willing to do whatever it takes." "No," Trista said. "We're not. You found treasure that wasn't yours. You considered keeping it. And I didn't. That's the difference." Victor lunged. For an older man, he moved with shocking speed, professional training evident in every strike. He'd been doing this his whole life, taking what wasn't his, justifying it through philosophy and entitlement. But Trista had been surviving, and survival was its own kind of training. They grappled, crashed against the wall. Victor's elbow caught Trista's ribs, the same spot from their earlier fight, and pain exploded through his chest. Trista drove his forehead into Victor's nose, heard the crack, felt hot blood. "I earned this," Victor gasped, clawing at Trista's face. "I planned it. I executed it perfectly. You stole from a man and broke his heart." They fell, rolling across the concrete floor. Victor's hands found Trista's throat, squeezing. Trista's vision tunneled, darkened at the edges. His hands scrambled across the floor, found something, the crowbar, just within reach. He could end this. One swing, Victor wouldn't get up. Sarah's voice, a memory. The man you are is the man our son will become. Trista released the crowbar. Instead, he drove his knee into Victor's stomach, broke the chokehold, shoved the older man away. Victor gasped for air, blood streaming from his nose. His eyes landed on a can of paint thinner near the stairs, left by contractors decades ago. His face twisted with terrible resolution. If I can't have it, no one can. He lunged for the can. Trista was faster. He tackled Victor, driving him away from the flammable liquid, away from the collection, away from the destruction he'd been willing to unleash. FBI, hands where we can see them. The basement exploded with light and sound. SWAT team pouring down the stairs, weapons drawn. Lorraine Pacheco behind them, her face grim and professional. On the ground. Now. Trista released Victor, raised his hands, dropped to his knees. Rough hands pulled him forward, zip-tied his wrists. Standard procedure, he understood that. But his heart hammered with a different fear now. Where's my son? He gasped. Is Jamie safe? He's at the church, Lorraine said, securing Victor. He's the one who told us what was happening. That boy saved your life. They hauled Trista up the stairs into chaos. The street was a carnival of emergency lights. Police, FBI, ambulances. Media kept back by barriers, cameras capturing everything. Through a window, Trista saw a police cruiser. Inside, pressed against Pastor Woods, was Jamie. Their eyes met across the distance. Jamie's face crumpled with relief, and he pressed his small hand against the glass. Trista wanted to go to him, to hold him, to promise it was over. But the officers were guiding him toward a different vehicle, reciting rites he barely heard over the thunder in his ears. Mr. Arkins. Lorraine appeared beside him, her voice low. For what it's worth, I believe you. I believe you had no knowledge of what was in that house. The letter your son carried out, that helps your case considerably. Am I under arrest? You're being detained for questioning. There's a difference. She paused. You fought him. You could have killed him. Why didn't you? Trista looked back at the Victorian house, at the home he'd bought for $20 and lost in just over a week. Because my son was watching. Not literally, but he's always watching, learning what kind of man his father is. Lorraine nodded slowly. Get him medical attention, she told the officers. And someone get that kid to see his father before we transport. Moments later, Jamie was running across the street, ducking under barriers, Rusty at his side. An officer tried to stop him, but Lorraine waved him back. Jamie crashed into Trista's legs, sobbing. You're okay. You're okay. I'm okay, buddy. Trista's bound hands couldn't embrace his son, couldn't wipe away those tears, but he knelt down, pressed his forehead against Jamie's. You were so brave, so incredibly brave. I was scared. Being brave means being scared and doing it anyway. You saved me, Jamie. You saved us both. Pastor Woods collected Jamie gently. Come on, sweetheart. Let your dad handle the official business. You can stay with me tonight. What about Uncle Darren? Jamie asked. Trista looked up, saw his brother pushing through the crowd, his face pale with shock and guilt and love. Uncle Darren's here too, Trista said. You'll be safe. Promise. As they loaded him into a cruiser for transport to the hospital, protocol for the injured, Trista caught sight of Elena Castellano standing at the edge of the chaos. She was watching the FBI carefully extract paintings from the basement, tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met. She nodded once, a gesture that might have been gratitude or understanding or simply acknowledgement that this nightmare had cost them both something they could never get back. The cruiser pulled away. Trista looked back at Forge Street one last time, at the house that had promised shelter and delivered chaos, at the collection that had tested everything he believed about himself. Victor's words echoed, we're the same. But they weren't. Trista had proved that tonight. He'd had the chance to become the monster desperation created, and he'd chosen differently. For Jamie, for Sarah's memory, for the man he needed to be, even when being that man cost him everything. The house disappeared behind emergency vehicles and darkness. Ahead, Somewhere waited questions and legal battles and consequences he couldn't predict. But tonight, Jamie was safe. The collection would go back where it belonged. And Trista Arkins, homeless father and accidental hero, had learned that the true cost of treasure wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the choices you made when everything was on the line. And somehow, against all odds, he'd made the right ones. 3 weeks later, Trista sat in Darren's guest room, staring at legal documents he barely understood. Criminal charges had been dropped. The confession letter had cleared him of any prior knowledge. But the legal questions remained, tangled and unresolved. Downstairs, Jamie's laughter drifted up. His nephew was teaching him video games, normal childhood sounds that had been absent for too long. Twice a week, Jamie saw a therapist who specialized in trauma. He was doing well, she said. Resilient. His main question was always the same. When can Rusty come home? The shelter had him temporarily. Darren's house had a no-pets policy from his HOA. Just another reminder that this wasn't really home. The media had made Trista into a symbol, folk hero to some, opportunistic squatter to others. His face was everywhere, his story dissected by strangers who thought they understood what desperation felt like. Elena Castellano's invitation came on embossed stationery. Please visit my estate. We need to talk. Her home was everything his wasn't, old money preserved through generations, art covering every wall. She led him to her father's study, photographs of Vincent Castellano smiling from frames. $2 million, Elena said simply, as a finder's fee. Another $1 million to Millbrook's homeless services in your wife's name, the Trista Arkins Fund. Trista's breath caught. In exchange, you make no legal claim to the collection. You cooperate fully with authentication and return. She paused. I've also been researching Raymond Kowalski. I'm prepared to fund a legal case to recover what he stole from you. Why? Trista managed. Because justice shouldn't depend on wealth. Because my father would have wanted it. Elena's eyes held his. Because sometimes doing the right thing means acknowledging that right and legal aren't always the same. $2 million. Security. Jamie's future. Everything he'd been fighting for, offered freely. I need time, Trista said. You have until tomorrow, Elena replied. After that, my lawyers take over, and I can't promise this offer remains. That night, Trista called Pastor Woods. How do I know I'm making the right choice? You already know, she said gently. You've known since the beginning. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept grace when it's offered. 6 months later, spring sunlight warmed the porch of 1847 Forge Street. Trista set down his hammer, wiping sweat from his forehead, and stepped back to admire his work. The Victorian's wraparound porch stood solid now, rebuilt board by board with his own hands. The house had transformed. New windows caught the afternoon light. Fresh paint covered decades of neglect. Not the ornate original colors, but simple cream that made the structure feel clean, hopeful. The tower room where Jamie now slept had become his son's sanctuary, filled with books and a real bed and posters of superheroes who saved the world. In the backyard, Rusty patrolled his new fence, barking at squirrels with the enthusiasm of a dog who finally understood he was home for good. Dad, Uncle Darren's here. Jamie called from inside. Darren's visits had become weekly rituals. The brothers had found something unexpected through the chaos. Not the relationship they'd had before, but something new, built on honesty about their failures and commitment to doing better. Brought lunch, Darren said, carrying bags from the deli. And Sarah wanted me to remind you about dinner Sunday. The kids are making Jamie a cake. Pastor Woods arrived next, followed by neighbors. Trista had been training in basic construction skills. 3 formerly homeless men learning trades, paid from the finder's fee that had changed everything. The Trista Arkins Fund had opened its doors last month in a renovated storefront downtown. Elena had attended the ribbon cutting, standing beside Trista as photographers captured the moment. The awkwardness between them had softened into mutual respect, 2 people who'd found unexpected grace in their shared tragedy. Victor Sloan's trial had concluded with a 20-year sentence. His testimony had authenticated the entire Castellano collection, now displayed in museums across the country with Vincent Castellano's name honored as Elena had always wanted. Ray Kowalski had fled again, but Trista found he no longer cared about revenge. Some debts weren't worth collecting. Sophia stopped by with paperwork, the last legal documents closing the case. "The city's actually considering policy changes," she said. "Your case highlighted how property auctions can trap vulnerable people. It's not much, but it's something." Tommy Bradford was there too, his book proposal accepted by a major publisher. He'd given Trista the advance to read, asking permission to tell the story. "I want to get it right this time," he'd said. As evening fell, Lorraine Pacheco arrived, officially there to close final paperwork, unofficially there because she told Trista once, "You reminded me why I became an agent, not to enforce rules but to serve justice." Elena came last, carrying a small wrapped package. Inside was a painting, not from the stolen collection, but from her father's personal work. A simple watercolor of a house, golden light in its windows. "For Jamie," she said, "to remember that homes are built with more than money." The gathering spilled through rooms that had once held only despair. Neighbors brought food. Children played in the backyard. Laughter filled spaces that had known only silence for decades. Trista stood on his rebuilt porch as the sun set, watching Jamie chase Rusty through the grass. His son's laughter rang clear and uncomplicated, the sound of childhood reclaimed. Darren joined him, handed him a beer. "You did good, little brother." "We did good," Trista corrected. "All of us." Pastor Woods approached, her face soft with satisfaction. "Your wife would be proud. Of both of you." The words settled in Trista's chest, a weight he'd been carrying finally easing. He'd made a promise to Sarah, to take care of their boy no matter what. He'd kept it, though not in any way he could have imagined. Jamie ran up the porch steps, breathless and grinning. "Dad, can Marcus?" He pointed to a neighbor's son. "Sleep over this weekend?" "Sure, buddy." "Cool. Come on, Rusty." Jamie raced back to play, his joy uncontained. "Marcus," Darren said quietly. "Like Marcus Webb." "Yeah." Trista watched his son. Jamie asked about him, about the letter. "I told him the truth, that Marcus made mistakes but tried to make them right. That's what matters." Inside, someone called for dinner. The house filled with voices, warmth, life. Trista paused in the doorway, Rusty leaning against his leg, and looked at the home they'd built from ruins. The treasure hadn't been what they'd found in the basement. It had been the community that emerged from crisis, the family that reunited, the grace extended and accepted. It had been learning that wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in the people who showed up, who stayed, who chose love over law when the two diverged. Jamie called from inside, something about dinner getting cold. Trista smiled, closed the door behind him, and stepped into the light and laughter of a house that was finally, truly, home. Not because of what they'd found there, but because of what they'd built. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.